Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're off to Ayrshire, which is in the southwest of Scotland. Quite a challenging episode to make, as Scotland doesn't release individual crime statistics for each town the way England and Wales does. So instead, it was a case of trawling through internet message boards to see what the locals were saying, and then visiting literally every town and spending some time in them. TurdTowns is always a mission, and something usually goes wrong. This time my damn microphone somehow got turned off. Fortunately, you know me, and I don't have anything interesting to say. No one wants to look at my ugly mug anyway. And I know, I'm about to catch pelters in the comments section from Scottish people because I am not Scottish. So let me just reassure you. There's no agenda or bias against your great country. I've been making these same videos on Wales and England, so you don't need to feel singled out. Got it? Good. Today's episode of TurdTowns is coming at you from Ayrshire, Scotland. North Ayrshire is the third poorest part of Scotland, whilst East Ayrshire is the seventh. So not the greatest place to live based on that. But it's strange because the scenery around here is stunning and so is the coastline. It's just that the former mining towns and tourist places here have fallen off the map. Let me know where you think should feature on this list and if you think Scotland would be better off out of the United Kingdom based on what you're going to see in this video. Before we get into the 8 biggest turd towns in Ayrshire, don't forget to hit like, share and subscribe to help turd towns thrive. Number 8. Irvine. Irvine is the largest town in North Ayrshire with a population of 33,000. It's a filthy, polluted cesspit sinking into 2 rivers. Avoid this place at all costs. Irvine was the capital of Scotland during the 12th century, but eventually it was realised that it was too shameful having this as a capital of a great country. Apparently, this is the oldest continuously habitated place in Europe, which means they must be very lazy, as the place hasn't progressed much from the Middle Ages. The only reason anybody from outside the town would ever visit here is due to the massive Rivergate shopping centre. It's an appalling eyesore built over a muddy brown river, but to be fair, it was pretty good inside. Next to the shopping centre there used to be 5 massive council flats, schemes. They call them schemes up in Scotland, which by the way I absolutely hate because it sounds like the residents are up to no good. But these flats used to dominate the landscape of Irvine, really adding the extra hint of grime and depression. But they pulled them all down recently and hope to build houses here. Not sure what happened to the many people who would have lived here. Presumably they were demolished too along with the flats. I was laughing at these 2 coppers on push bikes, but then they actually arrested a shoplifter, which is officially the first time I've seen any crimes getting solved on a TurdTowns trip. The criminal must have been a bit slow. He must have been from Irvine. It's not all positive though. Irvine Academy is one of the worst schools in Scotland, and on top of that, this area has serious issues with kids missing school. Almost 50% of the little Asbos miss 10% of the entire schooling, and only 9% of kids leave this school with 5 GCSEs A to C. This was the first place that Rudolf Hess cited on his crazy plane ride from Germany. He was so disgusted and appalled that he vomited fiercely and crashed his plane not long after. Lots of famous people are from Irvine, which shows that sometimes being in the worst surroundings can help people find that inner hunger to better themselves. Nicola Sturgeon, Edgar Allan Poe, Stephen Naismith, Billy Gilmore and Chris Boyd. Irvine actually has higher house prices than lots of other places on this list at an average of 150,000. It's possibly due to being more work locally. I can't really find any other possible reason. Data revealed this month that there is a total of 23 registered sex offenders living in the town to really add and contribute to this wonderful place. My advice would be come for Rivergate Shopping Centre and leave as quickly as possible. It seems like the sort of place you could catch a plague, and then you'll be trapped here for even longer. Number 7. Ayr. The most famous place on today's list is the town of Ayr with a population of 46,100. On multiple occasions, Ayr has applied to become a city, but they keep getting rejected because it's not good enough here. Ayr seems to be a town that people have mixed feelings about, and I understand that sentiment. I think that's coming from a lot of older people who are used to the way Ayr used to be when it was a holiday destination. A quick visit there now will show you it's not what it used to be. Ayr is famous for poet Robert Burns, who lived nearby. If he could see what was going on now, he'd be turning in his grave, because this week it was announced that plans have been made to rename the annual festival, which was originally named Holy Fair after a Robert Burns poem, but it will now be called Summer Fair, as they were worried about the offence and disgust people would experience at the name Holy Fair. If you ask me, it's not fair. Another famous person from here is angry Scotsman and WWE professional wrestler Drew McIntyre. Now an American citizen, it seems unlikely he'll ever want to return to Ayr, Scotland.
My name is Drew Galloway, and I'm up in Ayr, Scotland, my hometown. An absolute hellhole, which I like cheese and toasted with that fella.
But talking of angry, I have to say, walking around these larger towns in the early morning, usually swamped with homeless people, but I didn't see a single one in Ayr, which means they must be looking after them well. That's good to see. Ayr used to be famous for how good its shopping was. At its peak, there was a shop for every 270 people. That was only in 2014, and Ayr has had a sharp fall off since then. The main shopping street is fairly grand and nice, and there's also a new shopping centre, which is sadly a waste of money as half the big department shops are now empty. You can just tell it used to be nice here, but sadly much of the town centre is an eyesore now. One of the malls is being pulled down and turned into housing, which is much the way many town centres are going. It's only taken 3 years to start pulling bits off of it. As great as Amazon can be, I still like being able to go into a shop and seeing what I'm buying, especially if it's a big purchase. Even more especially if it's closed too. It's probably why I end up looking like Stig of the Dump on crack most days. There is actually an airport nearby where you can fly to such exciting destinations as Spain and the Canary Islands, and that's about it. Ayr itself is not the worst place in the county as it has a nice beach, amenities, transport, and people do actually still come here on as a tourist destination in the summer months. Due to that, it's the most expensive place on today's list with an average house price of $185,000. It's honestly so sad seeing Ayr look like this. I've never been here before and I can just tell this town's going to the dogs. But what is the solution? I tried to buy something from an Argos the other day and they said I couldn't have it for a couple of days. No good to me when I'm up here for work. It's like even when you try to use the shops, they're so impractical that they're useless. But anyway, Ayr is a really nice town. It just shouldn't be this way. All I ever see is cafes, vape shops and phone shops. Even charity shops are getting rarer. I'd love someone in the comments to explain to me how certain types of shops are allowed to open on a cash-only basis. How is that legal? But at the same time, if they all went away, we'd have literally nothing. But anyway, just look at this place. It's the sort of thing Americans envision of what the UK would look like. But then you turn around a corner and it resembles something out of The Purge with boarded up buildings and shifty looking people. Up the road in Newton, the dealing and antisocial behaviour has gotten so bad that the residents are afraid to go home, with one old lady locking herself in a hospital. They have likened their neighbourhood to a supermarket for drugs. It's gotten so bad that there are published maps of known drug usage spots so that residents can avoid the needles. There's a lot of nitties in there. Not terrible. To be honest, it's the only place I visited which I would actually consider returning to. It's just starting to slide into the turd bowl and it needs to be wiped away. Number 6, Saltcoats. Saltcoats is a seaside town with a population of 12,100. Everybody here has that sickly look about them. You all know the look I'm talking about, that deformed, malnourished look that you only get in certain places. Speaking of places, what sort of place is Saltcoats then? Well, it's the sort of place which died when the UK holidays died out. But somehow it looks even more sorry for itself. Everything is boarded up and neglected. Even the parking machines didn't work. You have to feel for this older generation. Not only have they witnessed the dramatic decline of our countries, but they can't even figure out how to pay for parking now in a hellhole like Saltcoats. I tried to help this one old geezer tourist do it online, but when even that failed for him, he gave up and left the town. The seafront isn't exactly the most tourist-friendly place either. A bunch of old grimy bedsits and hardly a thing to see or do. They do have 3 outdoor ocean pools. We've actually got one of these near to me in Clevedon, and I've always thought, these things look filthy and freezing. Does anyone actually ever use them? It looks like a concoction of piss, dead pigeons and algae. Finances are very tight in this town, which is why locals were outraged in December as the council decided to waste taxpayers' money building pavements on roads in the middle of nowhere. It's not the greatest of places, but you are able to pick your own house for an average of $134,000. It's not surprising really, as this area of Scotland is the 3rd most deprived. Wow, a PS2 and Xbox game shop. I bet this place was booming 15 years ago. Yeah, the shopping isn't great here, and what I would expect used to be quite a nice long popular shopping street. There's nothing to do here, and most of the young people resort to drug use. If you're of an older generation, you'll probably be happy enough just walking along the seafront. Just remember not to actually look at anyone, or you'll quickly find out what is in one of the Saltcoats sea swimming pools. Number 5, Ardrossan. Next, it's the ferry terminal town of Ardrossan with a population of 10,322. It used to be a very important town with ferry links to the Isle of Man, Ireland and the Scottish Islands. Nowadays, it's just a terminal for the ferry to the Isle of Arran and Campbelltown. It's honestly not the worst looking place I've ever been, but everybody I asked in Ayrshire said this was the worst, so I can only imagine it's down to the sort of people who live here. Somehow, this pointless insignificant place has 3 train stations, which just seems excessive. In fact, 2 of them are so close that only an Asda separates them. They should be renamed Crap Shopping East and Crap Shopping West. Because of the train line running through the place, barriers often come down, trapping you inside Ardrossan, which makes you scream with agony. Last year, pupils at the secondary school were left drinking water infected with Legionella, something which causes an ammonia-type illness. Despite their complaints about the discoloured water, the school ignored the pupils and told them it wouldn't do them any harm. They went on drinking it for a couple of months until the bacteria was discovered during maintenance. Scotland's so cold that the fact everybody had a cold didn't seem like a big deal. The town itself is basically a wide road with council flats and derelict shops, and at the bottom you'll find an Asda and the Ferry port out of here. I liked it here best, because it felt like I could escape. Now I bet, like me, you're wondering what all this mess is down by the harbour. Well, and this really is a complete joke, it's been declared a national embarrassment to Scotland. A decade ago, it was decided that this harbour needed to be upgraded due to the 2 new Isle of Arran ferries being unable to use the current port in Ardrossan. Originally, the work to fix up the port was quoted at 40 million, but over time that has now somehow doubled. Yeah, I've heard that one before. Ferries have been forced to dock up the coast in Troon, which causes 25 minutes extra journey time. The committee haven't met in 8 months, and the UK government said that they can't do anything about this. Everything is in chaos, and nobody seems to care. Conspiracy theorists say it was the plan all along to use this land for housing. If the ferry goes, it will be catastrophic, because that's the last thing here of any value. It has this humongous derelict old building right on the seafront, which used to be a school. This one's been sat empty for 11 years, and despite the local hooligans' best attempts at burning it down, this one refuses to collapse. Ardrossan is like a stubborn stain. You can scrub and scrub at it, but it's just not coming out. Number 4, Patna. Patna is a miserable village in the middle of nowhere with a population of 1900. It's basically a freezing cold council estate in the arse end of nowhere. There's literally 0 reason to ever visit here, and there was about 1,000 reasons I could think of to leave. The village was established due to the need to house workers for the nearby coalfields, and it was named after Patna in India. Actually a unique thing for the UK. When the Indian people became aware of this, they were very excited to learn of a second Patna. A representative was even sent from India to Scotland, but on his arrival he was so disgusted by the Scottish village that he demanded it changed its name as it was an insult to the Indian city. This is one of the most filthy places I've ever visited. I know it's not the public's responsibility to pick up rubbish, but in places with pride they have community groups who take care of this sort of stuff. Patna has no pride. In fact, since no one would ever visit here, this means the mess is solely caused by the locals. They only have themselves to blame. I visited Main Street in Patna. When this is your main street, you know this place is bad. Pulling down derelict buildings and then just leaving the space as nothing only increases the town's appearance by perhaps 10%. If they were planning on leaving it like this, maybe make these spaces into parks or maybe a collection of dog poo bins. Certainly needed in Patna because it's everywhere. Patna, more like Crapna. There's nothing here at all, just one unfriendly looking pub and shops in sheds which look on the verge of collapse. The sort of people who live around here are the sort of people who collect dead dogs in their freezers to use in their haggis pies. The school here dominates the landscape and I really like it. I love how it's protected by a 30-foot fence to keep the public safe and the animals inside there. It really makes the centre of Patna look great and safe. If you want to live here, and I honestly have no idea why you would, but you can pick up a house for an average of 78,000. It does have a nice river though, which is probably full of piss, trash and sheep carcasses. But try not to think about it and instead take in the only nice thing in the village and pretend you're up a nice mountain somewhere. Number 3, Maybole. Maybole is a town in South Ayrshire with a population of 4,333. Admittedly, I didn't hate it here, but my view might be getting skewed because I spoke to several really friendly people here. The general consensus seems to be, they know it's a turd town, but they still have a shred of hope that it can turn around. Maybole has gone to hell since the bypass was built and nobody wants to visit Maybole. The town is in a really bad state. Terrible, actually. It's worse than most of the towns in the Welsh valleys. It's definitely up there with the worst high streets I've ever seen. The job is almost complete. There's just a couple of nail bars and a newsagent left. This is where some of your towns will be in a few years. Complete devastation. Maybole just got there faster than the rest. This is a town which just can't win. Go back 5 years and they were complaining that it was too busy here as the town was on an A road on a busy trucking route. Now there's a bypass and the town is dead. It's almost like a ghost town. Maybe a case of be careful what you wish for. In Maybole's favour, the houses are nicer than the rest on this list. There's lots of cared for ancient houses, but the council tenants are mostly looking after their places too. When you're down here, you don't think you've got to get out quickly. If you can stomach the depressing nature of the place though, you can snag a house for an average of only 124,000. But ultimately, it's just a sad place to be and further pushes the ideals that the UK is becoming a third world. You can't look at this place and tell me it's the sign of a successful, thriving place. Number 2, Auchinleck. What a dreary and depressing hellhole. But first, this East Ayrshire town has a population of 3,683. The name in Gaelic translates roughly to filled slab. Well, they could do with some more slabs of concrete to fix this place up. Basically, it's a long road running down a hill with some scruffy houses attached to the side and a massive Tesco at the bottom of the hill. It resembles a horror film where Tesco is the monster villain and everyone else is just sliding into its mouth. I know it's partly of our own makings, but the damage these large supermarkets have done to these small towns is catastrophic and they should be forced to pay reparations to the townfolk. I actually got a jump scare in this town too. On top of the hill you will find a huge derelict complex of buildings and it's an absolute state. It was a school and a leisure centre and this tiny town actually had its own swimming pool. The ugliest in existence, but this pointless insignificant cesspool had a pool. With the building's closure, the secondary school kids were forced to go to school in the next town. A decision was made in 2023 to shut the important community building because it was underperforming and needed £10,000 spent on the roof. Whilst filming the abandoned school, I managed to set off the alarms. Trust me, I don't want to come in. Despite the residents overwhelmingly voting in favour of keeping the buildings, they were told too bad. Instead, the council will invest £1.4 million building some football pitches and sports facilities at some point. Something just doesn't add up there. Originally, locals were told that a demolition and opening of the new facilities would coincide at the same time, but now they were behind schedule and that won't be happening. Wow, it's like the locals were dumb enough to believe them. So I say to the townsfolk, don't listen to them, don't let them knock down the leisure centre. They're lying and they're being deceitful. For what they're going to take from you, you won't get as good back. The main drag here is one of the most miserable places I've ever laid my eyes on. There's about 2 shops still open, and until Tesco starts selling haircuts, I think they're going to be safe. I don't want Bonnie Burgess from number 5 with one leg hacking off my lochs with a club card. Before we get into number 1, I just want to say Cumnock. It almost made the list, but I went there, and despite it being scruffy around the outside, I didn't hate it. Number 1, Cumnock. Cumnock is a town in East Ayrshire with a population of 8,825. Cumnock was the home of the father of the Labour Party and lots of mines. Sadly, the mines no longer exist, but the same can't be said about the Labour Party. As you walk around the town, the main thing that hits you is the distinct stench of urine in the air. Everything here looks like it needs a good wash, including the people who are also in need of toilet training. There's a gigantic former primary school towering over the town. It's one of the biggest buildings in the town and you can't miss it. This thing apparently closed in 2023, but from the look of it, that can't be true. In 1 year, the council have wasted £60,000 on the upkeep of the building. For God's sake, just tear it down. Nobody's going to want this. Look at the state of it. It looks like a workhouse from Oliver Twist. Imagine sending your kids here. You'd get arrested for child abuse. Elsewhere in the town, a former bank has been kept on by the council. Empty since, and you're going to love this one, empty since 2019. They've spent £200,000 of taxpayers' money on this one. Wow, half a decade and nobody else wants it. You'd think they'd take the hint. Kids hurl abuse at you as you pass by, desperately trying not to make eye contact with anybody. It's a desperate and rough feeling place. Everything is smashed up and it feels like a third world country teetering on the edge of a war zone. The schemes here are some of the ugliest in existence. The bar wasn't exactly high, but there's something about the estates of Cumnock which have you reaching for the Pepto-Bismol. It truly has to be one of the most horrible places I've ever visited. And horrible it may be, but it's actually one of the most affordable places in the whole of the UK. The average price here is $138,000, so you can escape the daily grind of bills and instead come here and find a different sort of escape. Down the road you'll find New Cumnock because one was apparently not enough. That place has won the title of worst place in Scotland a couple of times, but it didn't even seem that bad there. The eyesores have been torn down, and it has a school for the kids. And I am a man who will always choose the original, and Cumnock is truly the original turd town that will really make you feel fortunate for where you're living. And really, the trend for Ayrshire was let's tear down everything and leave green spaces and hope nobody notices. It's not great either way if you live it, but perhaps 10% less depressing than a smashed up arsonist's heaven. And that's another log down the bog. Did you agree with the list? Where did we miss out from Ayrshire? Do you think Scotland would be better off without England at this point? Was it in worse or better shape than you expected? We're staying up in Scotland for our next video, so make sure you stick around for that one coming your way soon. And don't forget to hit like, share and subscribe to help TurdTowns thrive.